Hi there, I am Kelly Dean, founder of the Tummy Team. I'm a physical therapist and I'm also a competitive swimmer. And this video is going to talk to you a lot about swimming and diastasis recti. And there's a lot of confusion out there about sometimes people are told, and I was told this, that swimming can actually cause your diastasis or can keep your diastasis from healing, and I'm going to explain why people are told that and where that comes from, but also what we can actually do to keep you in the pool. So a little bit about myself. I am a physical therapist and I work with clients all the time that have diastasis recti, which is a separated abdominal wall. And it's really common in prenatal and postpartum women. We have a lot of information at the Tummy Team about diastasis recti. If you don't know what that term is, that's not what this video is going to be about. But I want you to understand that I myself had a 6-finger wide. That means like I could put both hands into the two sides, this big gap in my stomach after I had my kids. And I was told by a lot of different professionals that swimming would only make it worse. My history with swimming is I started competitive swimming when I was 13, and then at the age of 15 I swam in Canada, so I made the Canadian national team, or Canadian nationals at 15, and then Olympic trials, and then I went off to college and I swam competitively all through college. And then after college I kind of stopped swimming. I went to graduate school and I had my kids, and swimming is kind of inconvenient when you have little children, and it took me a while to get back in the pool. So I took about 18 years off before I started swimming again, and now I actually swim on a master's team, and I'm 45 now, but I've been swimming for the last 5 years, and I have been, not only did I heal my diastasis with the Core Rehab program that I teach at the Tummy Team, but I've been able to not only keep it closed, but actually strengthen my core while competitively swimming. And I swim all of the strokes, including butterfly and backstroke, which are both the two probably top culprits of why people say don't swim. All right, so we're going to talk about that, and then I'm going to go over some helpful tips on how to use your core well for each of the strokes, including flip turns and different things like that for those swimmers out there. Now, I understand that some people watching this aren't going to be competitive swimmers that swim all 4 strokes, but there's a little something for everybody. If you like to swim and you're concerned about how that's going to heal your diastasis or how that's going to affect your diastasis, this video will be for you. This is my little shirt that I thought is pretty fun because it's absolutely true. I swim to burn off the crazy, because swimming is it's kind of a refuge for me. So, and I know it is for a lot of people. So to be able to say the one thing you love to do or the one way that you love to exercise is not good for your core can be really disheartening and really frustrating, and it's actually not true. So that's the good news. So why are we told that swimming could be bad? The number one reason, I think, is because your pelvis is like a bowl and your rib cage is like an upside down bowl. And these two bowls need to line up for that corset muscle to come together and to be active and elongated. And some swimming postures and habits can sometimes flare our ribs. Also, if we're really tight across our chest, which a lot of parenting postures, computer postures, driving postures make us really tight and rounded here, when we go to be in an elongated position, and if this tightness is not addressed, the rib cage pulls up and out, which takes that corset muscle, the transverse abdominis, and pulls it up and out too, putting that diastasis in kind of a stretched position where it won't heal well. So it's a combination of being really tight through here, maybe not having full range of motion in your shoulders, and being disconnected from being able to, from the transverse abdominis that holds the rib cage down. So in our core rehab process, we work on releasing a lot of these compensations and strengthening your core in upright positions, standing, walking, very functionally relevant positions. And swimming is a great sport because it actually does use every muscle in your body. It puts you in this position, which is the opposite of most things that we do and exercise that we do. Really elongates you, doesn't have a lot of impact because you're in water, and it allows you to get full range of motion through your shoulders in ranges that a lot of times we do most of our stuff down here. We don't even access this range of motion up here, which becomes pretty important when you want to get stuff out of cupboards and you want to pick up your kids and put them on the monkey bars, and you don't have any strength up here because you're doing everything down here all day. So there's some really relevant reasons why swimming is great, and it's one of those sports you can do your entire life. So I love that too. All right, so some basic alignment that you need to think about. Yes, you need to assess, how tight am I here? How can I start opening up my chest, kind of loosening up my shoulders? There's a lot of different things we do at the Tummy Team, a lot of different stretches that we can offer for that. But loosening up here and then learning how to activate your transverse and bringing those ribs down and in. So if you've been in an online program or done one of the Tummy Team classes or something like that, and you actually are actually already connected there, then we're going to start kind of from there. We want to make sure your ribs and your pelvis are connected, and we want you to recognize that swimming is all about breathing. And every time you exhale, like a lot of times, like if you're swimming freestyle, you breathe here and you come down and you're blowing out underwater. When you're blowing out underwater, you're also in this position. So drawing in your tummy every time you're blowing out. It's pretty easy to do. And you're doing that throughout your whole swim workout. The other thing is symmetry, you know, not watching your stroke and watching how certain parenting postures can kind of make us short on one side, or we can have one shoulder that's kind of tweaked because we always laid on that side when we were pregnant or when we were nursing our baby or something like that. And so that can kind of affect your stroke, so that now you're swimming with this asymmetrical stroke. So you want to look at how you can loosen up and balance out everything in your body, and maybe even having your coach or a friend or somebody in your family videotape your swimming so you see what you're doing, because it is a lot of repetition. So you want to make sure you're repeating a good pattern and not repeating something that might be causing some kind of issue down the line. All right. So we're going to talk specifically, we're going to start with freestyle because that's our front crawl or whatever you want to call that. That's what most people do or think about when they're swimming. And the key is that you're going to be in this nice elongated position. So you can practice this out of the water, being in this position and exhaling and zipping up and bringing those ribs together. And then when you swim, you actually, the arm kind of comes down straight down the center here. So on this is the work of your swim. You're going to actually push down and then rotate over and push down and rotate over. So this pressure down, if you saw me here, that pressure in, right? That's where I'm breathing out and I'm pushing against the water. Okay, so that's really easy to keep everything engaged and down. The time when people flare is on the recovery and on the reach. So you want to keep your arm loose on the recovery, and on the reach you want to stay connected here. That's also, the reach is also where you catch the water, so that's the first time that your muscle engages. So you want to keep that rib cage down. And sometimes this is just a bad habit from swimmers that were used to just kind of flailing their arms through the water, not really flailing, but overextending, because most of us are hypermobile. Really trying to stay connected and stay elongated, not crunched when you engage, but elongated and zipped up. All right, so freestyle is a lot, and backstroke is a lot of side stroke. You're actually doing a ton of rotation, and that rotation is going to be what helps your shoulder to not get sore. So the rotation here opens up my chest, and then here, okay. And every time I'm drawing down, okay, I'm doing this upright, but obviously you would see me like this in the pool. Now backstroke is one of the big culprits because it's really easy to flare your ribs and arch your back in backstroke. But, so this is again trying to work on getting some of that range of motion out of the pool, but remembering that backstroke is actually side stroke. You're actually rotate, and then again arms coming down, pushing while this arm is coming up, and then you rotate and this arm's pushing while this arm is coming up. And that pressure down here is the work of what I'm doing where I exhale and engage. Okay, And it's a nice, long, streamlined pelvis and rib cage bowls lined up, cores elongated. The big problem is sometimes people arch, they stay right on their back and they arch to get that reach, and that flares the rib cage. So if you can get the rotation, then you eliminate the arch. And watching that you're not really like throwing your arm back, but really just nice and smooth, head stays straight, and this is what your backstroke should look like, okay? All right, breaststroke, my worst stroke, but I can still teach you. The thing about breaststroke is you're gonna be here pulling up, and sometimes people will really arch their back and again flare the ribs, but really it's here, and not necessarily that you're bringing your shoulders up, but when you naturally bring the water up, your shoulders come up too. So that breaststroke is gripping the water here and then drawing the tummy in, zipping up, and then taking a breath. Okay, when you're coming up, you're taking your breath in, and that exhale is on that push out. So right here, you're going to grab the water and push out and really drawing your tummy in. The kick kind of coordinates with it. It's hard for me to demonstrate the kick, but breaststroke usually doesn't cause a problem with the diastasis. Unless you're a really advanced breaststroker that you did a lot of arching, but for most people they have a nice, that's an easy way to kind of keep the ribs locked in. There's not a lot of overextending, there's not a lot of overreach. So breaststroke's usually a pretty safe stroke. If you're a little bit worried, sometimes I tell people stay with freestyle and breaststroke, but in freestyle trying to breathe symmetrically both sides. I'm the worst at that. I just tend to breathe the one way, especially when I get tired. But trying to breathe on both sides to kind of keep the symmetry in your shoulder range of motion. Butterfly. Now this is obviously not for everyone, but people do ask me about it, and we do have a lot of competitive swimmers that go through our program and connect with me personally because of my background. I am a backstroker and a butterflyer. Those are my two specialties. So butterfly, you would think, oh gosh, that really is flaring the ribs. The only time that's really flaring the ribs is when you're incredibly tight here and disconnected here. So when we're opening up your chest with like Jesus pose, some of the door frame stretches, some of the things that we're doing throughout your rehab process, and exhaling and engaging here, you can eliminate some of that. And it is range of motion. So you want to get range of motion one arm at a time, but to get both arms, you have to have those shoulder blades being able to come back and up. Okay, and then the other thing people will think about is the dolphin kick. The dolphin kick kind of puts you in that way, and they're like, well, aren't you flaring your ribs in that way? Well, your core is completely engaged. Dolphin kick is probably one of the hardest core workouts you could do because you have to stay elongated and you have to work on one part of the muscle at a time in conjunction with your back muscles, your glutes, your thighs, and kind of the upper body muscles as well. So it's not an isolated crunch by any means. It's this constant movement where all of these muscles are kind of going together. So the big thing is recognizing that your hands need to kind of pull straight down, and then you have to have the range of motion in your shoulders to come over. The range of motion is probably what's lacking for a lot of people. They just kind of power through with this. I don't have the range of motion in my shoulders, so I'm going to arch my back to get the range of motion. That's where the problem comes in. So if you can get the full range of motion in your shoulders and around your shoulder blades, then you don't have to compensate with that really arched back. There is a natural wave that goes with butterfly, but when it's not necessarily just your back arching. When your back is up, your hips are down. So it's really, kind of this. Yes, there's some wave in it, but it's not like your back should be really arched when you come up. It's here, here. So it's a lot of actually more hinging than at your hips, and a lot more down in your legs than it is. There is some in your low back, but it's not as excessive as people think for what's going on, okay? So it's all about the flared ribs, that's the problem, and it almost always comes down to too tight here and not enough range of motion in your shoulders. So outside of the pool, you need to look at things that are going to elongate you, just exercises and stretches that are going to elongate you while you keep your ribs engaged. Even some band work, like the bands, the body elastic bands that we work, kind of working on getting the full range of motion of your arms, learning how to rotate without flaring your ribs, doing some stuff where you break down the stroke outside of the pool. You could also do this inside the pool. Like I did a lot of one-arm butterfly before I did two-arm butterfly to make sure that I could get the range of motion and not flare my ribs. There's a lot of different ways that you can kind of break down your stroke into what we call drills, where you're doing like one arm at a time, or you're just really going nice and slow to really feel what the form is. And it's just like everything. When we teach people how to run, we talk about form first. When we teach people how to jump, it's form first. So it's the same thing with swimming. There's a lot of muscle memory for ex-swimmers to go back to swimming, and sometimes we have to we can't do what we did before because we don't have the muscle strength we had then, and we have maybe new tightness from new roles in our life. So you have to address those things. And then a couple of questions that I always get are flip turns. Aren't flip turns a crunch? Yes and no. They're actually more like a tuck. They're more like a forward roll. A crunch is just one muscle at a time, you know, these muscles doing this. A flip turn is kind of you're rolling over while your legs are coming up and you're coming out of it this way. So there's your obliques are working, your back is working, your hip flexors are working, you tuck your head and your hips at the same time, and then you come off the wall in this straight position, neutral pelvis, nice and tall and elongated. So you do the flip, but it's not like you're doing this isolated flip over and over again, and there's a little bit of rotation with it and coming off. So a lot of times it's, if you're connected to your core, it's not causing a problem. Now, if you go in and you do a flip turn and you felt like, oh my gosh, I pushed out of my tummy, don't do a flip turn. Do touch turns until you feel really connected, because it is a pretty complicated move. Unless you have your flip turns down like this and you can kind of play around with it without, you know, drowning or sucking up a bunch of water, then don't worry about it. But the flip turn is such a small part of people's swimming. Unless you're a real competitive swimmer, then you really focus on your turns. Other than that, if you're just swimming for exercise, start out with your touch turn, because you can just touch, pull your legs in, and go off without a lot of a crunch. But I don't think the flip turn is detrimental in the long run. If you're staying connected with your core, like we're doing lap after lap after lap, a little turn at the end is not going to damage what we're doing the rest of the time. Kickboards are another thing. Kickboards sometimes make people flare their ribs, and that's because now you have a board that's floating up here, and it really can kind of arch your back and flare your rib cage. This all comes down to how much range of motion, how tight are your lats, how tight are your pecs, how tight is your QL, all of those things. And so if the kickboard tends to make you feel like you're really arching your back and pushing out your belly, then don't use a kickboard. I feel like the kickboard is a really easy way for me to kind of have something to anchor on and really draw my tummy in, and it makes me kick faster. But sometimes it's just a coordination thing for you, or a range of motion thing. And then the last thing I wanted to reinforce was swimming's really good for you. So don't be scared to do it. But also, if you haven't swam for a while, or if you know you don't have great form, then break down some of the activities on land with some resistance bands, with some weights, with even just range of motion like I've just been demonstrating through the air in front of a mirror can be really helpful for you to see how much range of motion do I have. If you haven't been moving your arms in these positions a lot and you have a lot of muscle tightness, the weakest link is always going to be the part that stretches, and for a lot of people that's this area right here. The rib cage pulls, and it pulls apart on that area, and that is why swimming with diastasis has gotten a bad name. But it can be fixed. Like I said, I've healed my diastasis and I've been able to swim competitively. I swim at nationals the last 2 years, and I swim butterfly, I sprint butterfly, I do backstroke starts off the block. I do a lot of the things I used to do as a collegiate athlete, obviously not as fast as I was, and not as many hours in the pool, but I am able to do it, and I feel like it helps my core stay strong for everything I'm supposed to do. All right, so I hope that answers some of your questions and that you guys are encouraged to keep swimming.